Wait, stop. That's the one. Welcome to Zen Tenn Speaks, a show where I make new friends and reconnect with old ones. A show where everyone's stories may inspire you to tell your own story. In this podcast, we encourage everyone to get rid of shame, guilt, fear, doubt, and judgments for themselves and for others, and replace those with love, empathy, compassion, understanding, kindness, and to do your best in everything that you do. In essence, to get rid of things that no longer serve your well being, to be true to yourself and be honest with others. So, you've mentioned to me that you had depression. Were you ever on medication or were you having God heal you or anything?
When I was 15 years old, after my parents got divorced, because my dad never wanted us to go to the doctor or get medical care, not because he didn't believe in it, but because we were living below poverty levels pretty much. We were super poor. He felt like we couldn't afford things like that. And so we would just not even go to the doctor very much because he didn't want to have to pay for it. So I had to wait till after my parents got divorced. When I was 15, I was officially diagnosed with clinical depression and social anxiety, and I did get prescription antidepressants, anti-anxiety, and I've been on them most of my life since then. I'm currently still on medications, different ones from back then, but I'm still on medication for that.
I've made some research and I saw that the Mormons have not food stamps, but kind of like a government, not government, but a Mormon supplement, kind of the government thing where the poor can be supported by the church. Were you not part of that, or how is that? What are you aware with that?
So there are welfare programs. They're not necessarily through the government or the state. The church does their own thing where people who pay tithing and fast offerings, that money is just collected by the church, and they're sitting on more than $100 billion, the church is, and they can use money from that to pay for food and clothes, basic needs for members. There's the Bishop Storehouse, which is just like a grocery store where you can go there and get all the food stuff that you need, all the basic essentials. Obviously, they don't have like tons of candy and extra stuff, but they have the basic stuff that you need to get by, even like bathroom items, toilet paper, toothpaste, deodorant, stuff like that. So because my family was so poor, we definitely did go to the Bishop Storehouse a lot when I was growing up. We also went to the DI, which is Deseret Industries. It's a church-owned thrift store, basically, like Savers, like Goodwill, where people donate their used things and you can go buy them for cheaper. So a lot of my clothes came from DI. We would have secret Santas for Christmas and stuff like that, where people in the ward would give us gifts and have it be anonymous as to who it's from. So we did get some kind of assistance, a little bit to help. It was enough to help us get by, but we still definitely struggled financially throughout my whole childhood.
Because I know in some religion, well, to my knowledge, in some religion, example with the Orthodox Jews, it's not promoted to be poor. One needs to be having entrepreneur leadership or doing something, or the community needs to get together to help each other out so they don't have a poor mindset or even have a poor lifestyle. So I guess does a Mormon promote the same, or they just don't care as much?
they they talk about helping other people out in that are in need, but it's more just talk, because there's definitely like wealthy people and there's definitely really poor people, and some of the poorest people are still expected to pay tithing no matter how poor they are. They're still expected to pay tithing. And there has even been talks where one of the people at conferences said, if you have to choose between paying tithing or buying food, pay tithing. If you have to choose between paying utilities or tithing, pay tithing. So they talk about helping people out, but it's not super enforced. It's just a matter of luck, really. And there were times where my family definitely did get some help, but there were other times where we didn't so much, and we were definitely struggling.
Oh, interesting. Because in Jehovah's Witness, I'm not sure how that is communicated because I was young and I didn't know so much. But I know they teach to saying that if you are a man of God, you're not supposed to have a poor mentality, basically. And you're supposed to not be wealthy, but be living above your normal life kind of a thing and not be poor. And my parents worked hard and they were not, I wouldn't consider them poor, but they weren't middle class or wealthy either because of the religions teaching you if you're poor, then that means you don't believe in God kind of a thing, because no people of God should be poor. And from what I've heard, it's the same with the Orthodox Jews. They teach them kind of like the same, kind of like Old Testament thing. Like you can be poor if you're serving God kind of a thing. So, and I've seen a lot of the photos with the Mormons on Facebook. It's all beautiful family, beautiful photos, family photos, and they look awesome, and beautiful homes and cars. And so they totally look middle class, and and they can afford to send their kids to missionaries. So I thought, yeah, so that's very interesting.
Right. I mean, they teach self-reliance, they encourage self-reliance, but they discourage any help from the government or the state. They more or less provide their own welfare system that they want people to depend on the church when they need help and not on the government or state. And they do encourage people to seek education. In fact, they teach that it's bad to have any debt unless it's debt for school. But at the same time, they teach you to get married young. It's like how you're supposed to get married and go to school. But there definitely is a lot of middle class, upper class, and you've probably noticed that the prophet and the apostles, they're all these super rich old guys that have 2 or 3 houses, nice cars, all their expenses are paid. Really quick, talking about finances, I just want to make this known to people who don't already know. There's a common misconception that leaders of the LDS Mormon Church are not paid, because you know how there's like preachers and pastors of other religions that do get paid, like it's their job. So while it's true in the Mormon Church that the teachers of the classes, the bishops, the stake presidents, they don't get paid. They're just volunteer. Well, they're not. They don't volunteer either. They get called. Will you do this calling? And you feel like you have to accept it. So they don't even. It's not like, hey, I want to do it. But anyway, they're not paid. But the general authorities, which is the 70 I had mentioned earlier, the group of 70, the mission presidents, which are the men that are in charge of groups of missionaries, and then the 12 apostles and the prophet and his counselors, they do get paid. They get paid 6-figure incomes. It's more than $120,000 a year. It's a salary, but it's called a stipend. It's not called a salary, but it is a salary. It's called a stipend. They get insurance. They get cars, travel expenses, houses. Everything is paid for them, and they even get a $1 million bonus when they first get called to their position to pay off any debts that they might have. And their kids and sometimes even grandkids get free tuition to BYU or the other LDS church schools. So the higher ups, they're paid for sure. They're paid.
What is BYU? Because I've seen it on the groups. People talk about it sometimes.
It's a regular university, college university. It's Brigham Young University. So Brigham Young was the second prophet of the church. He's the one that brought the Mormons to Utah and started Utah.
Right.
So it's a church-owned school, and it's run by members of the church. And so they have really super strict rules, honor code, things such as no having members of a different gender in your room after a certain time. They allow you to hold hands and hug and kiss and stuff, but if you get caught like having sex or doing anything like that, it's a honor code violation and people get kicked out for things like that. And they're expected to tell on each other. Like if someone sees someone else violating the honor code, they're supposed to tell on them. So it's a super strict place to go, a school to go to.
What is do the Mormons have rules when it comes to having friends who are not Mormons? Because I know Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a rule. They call people who are non-Jehovah's Witnesses worldly people. Do Mormons have, because I've talked to most Mormons that I talk to, they want to preach me, they want to lecture me, and they want me to get baptized. Like, when are we going to get baptized so we can become brothers, so we can hang out? But one of them I talked to, that I'm not going to say his name, we've been talking for months. And then I had to mention to him, hey, I don't want you to get in trouble. Are you supposed to talk to me? Because I know if I was Jehovah's Witness, I was not supposed to talk to him because he would be worldly. And he said it's okay because his thing is between him and God and not between him and church. And so I kind of feel like maybe he might be one of those dropouts because we're talking and the things that he says sometimes I'm like, that doesn't sound too churchy, but I'm not Mormon, so I don't know. So is there rules to when it comes to talking to people who are non-Mormons?
That's kind of a tricky ground right there. First, I want to say, if they're asking you when you're going to get baptized, first I want to say, don't do it. It's a trap. It's a trap. So there is some doctrine in some of the handbooks. There's a thing that's given to the youth. It's called strengthening the youth or for the strength of the youth or something like that. In there, it says you should be friends with people who share your same morals or values. So that wording doesn't specifically say you can only be friends with other Mormons, but I guess what it comes down to is how people interpret it. Because I had known kids when I was younger that were absolutely not allowed to hang out with non-Mormon kids, but I was allowed to have friends of any faith as long as I kept going to church. But then also the church also teaches every member is a missionary. And so that's why like your friends are trying to get you to be baptized, because they feel like anyone who's not Mormon, they want to bring them to the church and get them to join the church. And there's definitely exclusion for people that are not part of the church. Like this neighborhood I live in, most people in this neighborhood are Mormon. I don't get invited to parties and things like that because they know I'm not a member of the church anymore. And some of them hardly talk to me at all because of not being a member. So yeah, it's up to interpretation, but there definitely is exclusion when you're not a member.
Exclusion as in shunning?
Yeah, well, not so much. I mean, I guess in a judgment way too, but yeah, like people, if they see me outside, it seems like sometimes they don't want to talk to me because they think maybe I'm a bad influence or I'm lost or dangerous or scary or broken or dark or evil or whatever for having left the church. Mm-hmm. So but the church doesn't have an official thing where they say absolutely do not talk to non-Mormons. They never did that, but it just tends to happen.
Right. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses, they do have a thing where they call you to shun people and basically act as if they died, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, did the church know about your father's abuse ever?
Shortly after my parents got divorced, he did get called to a disciplinary council, which is where they found out about some of the things that had been going on, found out about some of the abuse, but they never tried to get police or law enforcement involved. So he never got any charges, never did jail time. He should have, but he didn't. He got excommunicated from the church for things like for child abuse, but I don't think they even knew about the sexual abuse that he did to my sisters, but they were at least aware of the child abuse. And that was enough to get him excommunicated. But yeah, no law enforcement ever got involved.
So what is the rule? Because Jehovah's Witnesses, it's hard to have that happen, especially to a man. They have a thing called third witness. So let's say if anything happened to you at home, if you went and say, hey, my dad did this, you are only one witness. Unless your dad said, yes, I did it, then he will be two witnesses. So who told on him and how was it believed enough for him to be excommunicated? Do you know that process?
I don't know the exact process, how it happened with him. I'm sure, a couple of the bishops were aware of the physical abuse when it was going on, because there were a couple times where my dad and my oldest brother would get to arguments and it would start getting physical, and my dad even called the police on my brother a few times. The bishop had come over to the house to try to de-escalate the situation. So some of the bishops were a little bit aware of the physical abuse, and my mom had talked to them, and when they made my dad aware that he was going to have discipline against him, he actually showed up to his disciplinary council meeting, and they read all the charges again, because they treat it like a court. So they read the charges, they state the charges, they give the person a chance to say what they think, and it's either 12 or 15 people that deliberate and decide. He got excommunicated, but he did show up to it, and I suppose he confessed to all the charges against him. I don't think he denied any of them, but at that point he probably was done with church and didn't want to keep going, so he was okay with getting excommunicated.
What are the rules for divorce? Like, how did your parents got divorced? For Jehovah's Witnesses, it needs to be you had to have sex outside the marriage. What is that? Fornication or adultery? What word is that one?
Adultery.
Adultery, yeah. That's the only grounds. The other grounds for separation can be a physical or whatever abuse, but it cannot be divorce. What are the grounds for divorce in Mormonism? Do you know?
They can get divorced for whatever reason, but there's like legally divorced, but there's the temple marriage. When they get married in the temple, there's still the legal side of it. Like, you'll have an actual marriage certificate showing that you're legally married. And then the religious part of it is the belief that you're sealed to your spouse for all of eternity. There are more strict requirements to get a temple sealing canceled, like what's called a temple divorce. So even if people get legally divorced, where they're just divorced, as far as the church is concerned, those people could still be sealed to each other for eternity if they don't get their temple divorce. And I don't know which things are required for a temple divorce, but I do know that in most cases, a woman cannot get her temple sealing, her temple marriage canceled, a temple divorce, without consent or permission from the man. So that's another sexist thing. And the men can be sealed to more than one woman, not meaning actually married to and living with more than one woman, but they can be sealed to more than one woman, which means according to their teaching in the afterlife, they will be polygamists that have lots of wives. So, for example, with my parents, they didn't get a temple divorce. They got divorced legally. So they're not married legally as far as the world is concerned. But as far as the church is concerned, my dad is still sealed to my mom because she couldn't get a temple divorce without him agreeing to and consenting to do that. And I think for him, he just didn't want to. It's not like he wants to be sealed to her, but he didn't feel like going through the hassle to do that.
Okay, that kind of makes sense too, because if the belief is you're going to be perfect anyway, so why unseal it? Because once you shed that body, you're gonna get along finally, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense in that kind of mindset. So tell us, why aren't you Mormon anymore? Like, what's the story of leaving?
So several times throughout my life, I just was wondering, is this even true? Does any of this even make sense? And it never really fully made sense to me. I never felt like it was true. And it was causing me so much stress and anxiety, always feeling like I was not good enough, always feeling like I needed to do more because I wasn't worthy. So it was really doing damage to me emotionally. And I suppose it probably could be part of why I have depression and anxiety. It very likely could be because of being involved in such a high demand religion that has such high expectations. It eventually got to a point where it was no longer useful to me. It was no longer good for me. It was bad for my mental health. But also I started really questioning things and really becoming more aware of issues that not only had affected me, but issues that affect everybody that is a member. And there was way too much stuff that was be a part of it anymore. I don't know if you wanted to mention, by the way, if you wanted to talk at all about me getting married in the temple and then divorced, or because my falling away from the church was a while after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. It will come to that.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. And so let's say if the scene did not play out how it played out for you to have doubt and depression and the pressure, etc., would you want to be a Mormon? Is this something that you would love to be, or you missed not being, if the scene did not play out like your history did?
I mean, for people that don't have any mental health issues, people that have a good family life, Mormonism is great for them. It makes them feel peace. It makes them feel love, acceptance, warmth. So for people that don't have any mental health issues, for people that have a good family life, the church can be a good thing for them. It can help them feel peace and happiness and acceptance and love and all that. For me, because of my shitty childhood, my dysfunctional, broken family, abusive father, the church was not a good place for me because he was going there with us. And so it was not a safe haven for me. And my anxiety and depression made me feel guilt and shame and unworthiness probably worse than a normal person would. So I suppose maybe I could have done better in the church if I had a good, nice, functional family, and if I didn't have any mental health issues.
Yeah, that probably had contributed to that, because as you grow up, I feel like most people, as they grow up in a family or their environment, contribute to their mental health, definitely. And to, as you, what you're mentioning, it does not contribute to a good mental health. And even in my family growing up, it was some crazy stuff as well. And I'm shocked and surprised at myself what I'm able to do mentally sometimes, because it was challenging as well. And I don't really want to, sometimes like in the past, I wanted to blame religion because of that. But there are some people who are non-religious and they still have crazy lives. So I feel like it's a human thing, unfortunately. And unfortunately, you would think religion would make people do better, because without its craziness, a lot of the principles in there, if you use them for your life, it can be good. But somehow people still don't use it for its goodness, which would lead to the next question. Are there some values that you learned in Mormonism that you are using in your life right now, if any?
Yes. I do want to first say everything good in Mormonism is not unique to Mormonism. Like, you can learn good values in any other religion and even without any religion at all. But then the bad things like guilt and shame and the level of those, some of those things are unique to Mormonism. Some of the things I developed were charity, honesty, generosity. I guess it could be considered good that I waited so long to have sex, so I didn't end up becoming a teenage father. But that is definitely something that could be learned in any religion. Service, helping out people, things like that. I learned while I was in the church, but like I said, those can be learned anywhere and even without any church at all.
What is your immediate family life like? Did you ever get married? Like when you became 18, how was your, were you still, because I don't remember you mentioned an age, like when did you leave, or what's the process about when you were 18?
Okay. I'm going to try to just like summarize all this along the timeline. I'll try to keep it concise. So I had graduated high school, graduated seminary. I was not going to church at all. I didn't serve a mission. I was just kind of doing my own thing from like 18 years old to about 20 or 21 or so. I was working, dating girls. I guess one thing that I could quickly mention that was a major significant event in my life was all the stuff I'd said about my childhood made me super uptight as far as thinking normal, natural things were bad, like sexual exploration and things like that. I had been a virgin up until I was 19 or 20 years old because of the church's teachings of how horrible it is to have sex before marriage. I did have sex once with one girl before I got married, and she pretty much pressured me into it. I didn't fully consent. I was very hesitant. I wanted to wait till I was married. I was telling her that I wanted to wait until I was married, but she just like really pressured me into it. Not physically, but she coerced me into it with manipulation. She pretty much said she would never want to hang out with me ever again if we didn't. So I gave in. So I felt really dirty and used and gross because of that. And then I also felt religious guilt and shame because of the church's teachings. But I never confessed to a bishop about it. I just like prayed for forgiveness, and I carried around the guilt and shame for it for a few years. When I was 20, either 21, I met a girl, I'm just going to call her Ava. She was a member of the church also, and she was a virgin. I told her that I had had sex once. She was okay with it. Um, I wasn't going to church when I met her, but she told me she was only willing to marry someone if they get married in the temple. So I had to start going back to church so I could be worthy to go to the temple. Um, so that meant I had to start paying tithing all the time. Had to go to church every Sunday, the meetings every Sunday. Uh, had to make it look like I developed a testimony. I had to make it seem like I believed in. Um, we dated for about 8 months before we got married. So we got married in 2005. We got married in the temple. So I kind of felt like getting married in the temple was maybe kind of a redemption for myself for not having served a mission. Like, so disappointed me for not going on a mission. And so then I got married in the temple. That's another ultimate goal for all Mormons is temple marriage. Because I did that, I felt like it was kind of redemption for myself. And up until that point, the time I had sex with the temple, I had the temple marriage. And it was weird. I'll just say, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but a lot of people feel traumatized with what goes on in the temple. I didn't feel traumatized, luckily, but it was definitely really weird for me.
Yeah, so I've watched a video about marriage and how they'll touch your lips and doing all this stuff. And I saw a documentary how they had to change their temple marriage protocols because some, especially the women, would say they feel violated because they touch your privates and such, like they bless you. Or in the past, they probably have done that. Maybe they changed it.
Yeah. In the early 1900s and late 1800s, when it all started, you used to have to get fully naked, get in a bathtub. They would wash you with water and oil, but you do it fully naked in a bathtub. That was in the early 1900s. There's a picture, if you Google online, temple ritual cleaning, washing and anointing, 1900s, somewhere it'll show a picture of the actual bathtub. And it's changed over time. Like they've cut out a lot of stuff. At some point, they were using oil where they would touch you like somewhere on your chest, somewhere on your thigh, on your forehead, and like 5 different spots. When I went through, they had cut out a lot of that to where all they did was a drop of oil. They rubbed it on my forehead, and it was more or less like a second baptism. And that was the moment where I finally felt like I was really forgiven for having sex before I got married. Was when they did the oil on the forehead, because I felt like it was a second baptism, and they said, "I pronounce you clean from the blood and sins of this world," something like that. Finally felt forgiven. Now the temple ceremony, you put on these really weird clothes, like you're wearing white clothes when you go in, but you put on like this hat that looks like a baker's hat. There's a weird thing they call a robe. It's like a toga, goes over the clothes, so you're not naked. But and there's a green apron that is like, it's supposed to be significant of fig leaves that Adam and Eve wore when they were in the Garden of Eden. That bullshit story. And there's like a sash that's just like a piece of fabric you tie around your waist. So it's really, really weird looking, culty, ritualistic stuff. At some point, people stand in a circle. They'll say a prayer together and they'll chant while raising their hands up, and they'll be like, blah, 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 blah. But they say certain words. I don't want to offend anybody, so I don't want to really say exactly what they say, because some people consider it sacred. It's just secret, really. But you can easily find it online. New Name Noah has a YouTube channel that shows video recorded of that stuff. And it's all ripped off from Masonic temple stuff. Like Joseph Smith, when he came up with it for the Mormons. He was also a Mason at the time, and he took all their rituals and handshakes and brought it to the Mormon temple ceremony, temple rituals. So there was the endowments, the sealing. Now the sealing is the part that's the marriage, but you don't walk down an aisle. You just are kneeling across an altar face to face with each other, and this old guy that you have no fucking clue who he is, he asks you, do you covenant to blah 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 blah. I don't even remember because I wasn't really paying attention, but you say yes. You don't even say I do, you just say yes. And the word love is not mentioned at all. You don't get to write your own vows. It's not romantic at all. It's just like super just super weird, very clean, sterile, I don't know, not warm at all, not romantic at all. It's just like making an agreement to something. So we did that in 2005. We had 3 kids while we were married. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me about the temple marriage? So they have made changes over the years for sure. Yeah. It's not as sexist now as it used to be, but it still is. So we got married in the temple. We had 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. Started becoming abusive towards me, emotionally, verbally, physically even. And I never have ever been violent with girls. I've always believed that you should never hit a girl, so I never fought back. Anytime she would get violent with me, I would just take it. One of the times I just got fed up with it, and after she had been beating me and throwing things at me and calling me names and everything, just totally berating me and making me feel like shit, I had had enough, and I called the police, and they came over, and I was hoping they would just talk to her and maybe scare her into not doing that anymore. But they actually pressed charges against her, and she got charged with domestic violence. She had to take an anger management class, pay like $500. And so she has a domestic violence charge on her record, but she still went back to her own ways. And I'm not going to go into all the details about everything. That's just an example of how abusive and horrible she was. And it made me feel really worthless. I got to the point where I started feeling suicidal, and I was miserable, and all the guilt and shame I already had from the church, and feeling like I was never good enough, never a good priesthood holder, feeling like I was not even close to being on the same level as other men. I just felt like I was totally worthless and not good enough. And I didn't enjoy going to church with either, because seeing all the other happy couples at church was really painful for me. They were all so happy and smiley and loved being there with their spouses, and mine was so abusive. And I just became so miserable that I got to a point where I didn't want to live anymore. And I more or less made a few actual suicide attempts, because I remember I already said I had depression and anxiety. For people that have depression, sometimes their mind can get so clouded that they don't think there's any way out. And that happened to me. I thought that maybe death would be the only way out. And so I actually, even though I had kids and was married, I just became so miserable that I didn't want to live anymore. And I made a few suicide attempts. I was never hospitalized for it because I did them in private. Nobody even knew. She didn't know at the time. I don't think she even today even knows that I had attempted it a few times. When I was within a few minutes of the end of my life, each time, the only thing that saved me and made me change my mind and decide to keep on trying and keep on living was thinking of my kids and how devastated they would be if I had gone through with it. So in a sense, my kids more or less saved my life.
So where are you and your wife now? Like
things just never, like, we tried counseling. We tried marriage counseling. We talked to a bishop. We went to LDS counselors through LDS Family Services, and all of that was totally useless. The counselors and therapists through LDS Family Services, they are licensed, but because they're members of the church, their primary goal is to get people to keep believing in God, things like that. So they were telling us things like, oh, you just need to pray together. You need to read the scriptures together, go to church together. And one of them drew a triangle and he's like, God's at the top, you're over here, she's over here. The more you both work toward God, you'll come closer together. And I'm like, when she's treating me like shit and she's so abusive, I don't want to do anything with her. So all the LDS counselors were useless. We kept trying to make things better. Things were just kept getting worse. She continued being abusive even after having the domestic violence charge. And the thing that finally got us to realize nothing was going to change was in 2014. She actually cheated on me. I don't know the details of what she did, but she was gone with another man for more than 3 hours behind my back, lied about it. And that was the one thing that got me to realize she was never going to change for the better. So we agreed to divorce. We got separated in 2014 in October, and we filed for divorce in 2015, and it was finalized in March 2015. And at that point, I still believed like the core teachings of the church, but I was mostly inactive. But I was still, for example, I was still keeping the word of wisdom, meaning no drinking, no smoking, no alcohol. And I still believed there was a God at that point. And so I still said prayers sometimes, but I wasn't going to church very often.
Are you still sealed?
Yeah, we are. Well, I'm not positive actually, because later on, and I'll get to this later on, but when I resigned my membership from the church, I actually resigned my membership from the LDS church. Effectively, that would cancel all the blessings and ordinances and sealings that I had done. So I think when I resigned, I think that would have canceled our temple marriage. But before that, even though we got legally divorced, I didn't bother going through the process of trying to get a temple divorce. And she did get remarried. She got remarried a couple of years ago. And she is still a member on record, but she doesn't go all the time. So she didn't feel the need for her to try to get a temple divorce.
What is your relationship with you, her, and the children you had? How has that changed?
So she still has she has physical custody with the 3 kids. I have visitation, so they live with her and they come to visit me one night a week and every other weekend. And we both have legal custody, so we can equally make decisions for the kids, but they do live with her. I pay child support, and she's remarried, so the kids have a stepdad too. But I'm definitely still a big part of their life. I know they love me. I love them, and I make sure to stay a big part of their lives.
What is your relationship with the stepdad, if any?
I get along with him okay. Like, I know it sounds like she was a horrible person because the way she was with me, but she's gotten better. She's calmed down a bit. She seems like she's more calm and nicer now, and he seems like a nice enough guy. I trust him with the kids. He doesn't seem dangerous or bad or anything, and we're able to be civil. Me and him and my ex-wife, we're all civil with each other. I'm definitely not like buddy with any of them, but we're able to communicate just fine without any problems.
Cool. So do you have the prospect of getting married again, or are you married now? Or
so after we got divorced in 2015, I got into another relationship with and we were together for about 4 years. but we never got legally married. My outlook on marriage now, like I'm willing to get in a relationship again, but to be honest, I don't see the need for an actual marriage, like a marriage certificate. It's just a piece of paper. I'd be fine committing to another relationship and living with someone again. I just don't see the need for an actual marriage anymore. But I was with Jenny for about 4 years, and we had I had another kid while I was with her. I don't know how much you want to get into that. Feel free to ask me anything about that. Jenny had never had kids before. She had never been Mormon also. So as far as my Mormon stuff with her, like at that point after I got divorced, I stopped going to church completely in 2015 after I got divorced, but before I met, because I just realized it was totally not useful for me at all. And it was too much stress to try to keep being a member. So I stopped going, made it easier to pull away from the church because not only was she not a member, but she was kind of anti-Mormon. She would always make fun of missionaries. She would, one time we were at her house while we were dating, and some missionaries came by to talk to us. And she's like, Joseph Smith's a fraud. And I didn't know what she was talking about because I didn't know the history of the church. I didn't know the truth about Joseph Smith. I just thought it was weird, but it made it easier to pull away from the church. And I was realizing just how happier I was without it. She has heart defects and some mental health issues. So she was unable to become pregnant. I won't go into detail with that, but she was unable to become pregnant, but she wanted to have a baby with me that we could raise together. Like she loved my older 3 kids, kind of like stepkids for her, but she wanted a baby. So she convinced me to have a baby. We actually did surrogacy since she was unable to become pregnant herself. We had a really good friend of ours offer to become pregnant and carry the baby for us. So my youngest daughter, she was born from my sperm and this other girl's egg. So I am the biological father of my 4th daughter, but she's got a different mom from my older 3 kids. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with her mental health issues, but I'll just say she has borderline personality disorder. She's bipolar. She has depression. She had switched meds a few times. She became suicidal a few times. She's a self-harmer. She's a cutter. And she threatened suicide several times while I was with her. Her mental health really went on a decline over the past couple years that we were together. And some things happened, and she more or less kidnapped my youngest daughter when my daughter was almost a year old. Jenny decided she wanted to break up, and she took my daughter with her, and she left Utah where I live, and she went to Idaho and was trying to keep my daughter up there with her, trying to be a single mom. And now keep in mind, she's not the biological mom, and she didn't have any legal rights either. All she had was legal guardianship, but she didn't have like step-parent rights or stepmother rights or anything like that. So, but because she had legal guardianship, she was able to take my daughter with her. And as far as the law was concerned, it wasn't kidnapping since she had legal guardianship, but it pretty much was because I didn't know if or when I was going to get to see my daughter again. This all happened in 2019 in April, and I'm trying to leave out all the boring details, but some major really fucked up things happened. Really, really fucked up things. It got really scary. Like I literally thought I would never see my daughter again because I was just doing all this crazy shit. She was suicidal and making all these threats and everything. And I had to have papers served to her. We had to go to court, and I had to have her legal guardianship removed. And a temporary restraining order was placed against her between her and my daughter when I got my daughter back into my custody. So since May 2019, I've had sole custody of my youngest daughter. And so I'm a full-time single dad. Like there's the single dads that have visitation with their kids like I do with my older 3. But then I'm a single full-time dad with my youngest, with my 4th daughter. And I've been raising her on my own since May 2019. She's 3 years old now. She'll be 4 next year in May.
So the mother is not in the picture.
No, because she got like, because of her mental health issues were so severe. Like the lawyer that was working with me, the attorney that was working with me, he was legit like scared for the safety of my daughter. He was saying that is delusional, and he was saying that she sounds like the type of woman that they make those Lifetime movies about, the type of women that kidnap the kids and drown them in the lake. You know, he was legit scared thinking that would happen. So he made it clear that she needs to stay the fuck away from us. On the papers that we had in court, the official thing against said has caused and will continue to cause irreparable harm if my daughter's in her custody. So that ordered her to give up the legal guardianship, and a temporary restraining order was put in place against her. So she had to stay away from me and my daughter. And I haven't heard from her or seen her or anything since May 2019.